Welcome to a NewsBits exclusive. Today we're going to be launching off of a Human Rights Watch report that just came out. It's 213 pages, very extensive, and we're going to be digging into the situation with Israel and what may be worth knowing when broaching the subject. Now please feel free to supplement or correct me in the comments, and I encourage you to always dig for yourself. This video is intended to give you kind of launching points and keywords for you to continue the investigation or continue the research on your own. So, Human Rights Watch claims that Israeli officials are committing the crimes of apartheid and persecution, and there's a call to action that we need to act on behalf of the millions of Palestinians being institutionally decriminalized, or discriminated against, excuse me. So, I'm just going to give you a look into an op-ed from Newsweek by Mohammed Shahada. Human Rights Watch called Israel an apartheid, and it should be a wake-up call. The actions of Israel are so severe that they amount to crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. Looking at it from the other angle, though, but while some have accused the group of using such bold language to delegitimize Israel. So let's iron that wrinkle out real quick. What is Human Rights Watch, and what are they trying to do? So this is a NGO, non-governmental organization. It's international. It's been around for quite some time, 43 years to be exact. And in 1997, it actually shared in the Nobel Peace Prize. And you guys can look more into what the Peace Prize was. It had to do with landmines. But they seem to be, on the cutting edge of progressiveness in human rights globally. So now let's look at the criticism that Newsweek just touched upon really quick. Human Rights Watch has been criticized for perceived bias by the national governments it has investigated, which makes sense. If you're being called out by somebody, you probably, even if they are right, you might have animosity or negative things to say about that group. But NGO Monitor is the one smearing them or criticizing them. So they claim that Human Rights Watch is biased against Israel. So now let's see if NGO Monitor has any bias on their end. So NGO Monitor is another NGO based in Jerusalem. Okay, that says a little bit about their bias. And let's see who's heading this NGO. This is Gerald Steinberg, Nafalti Balanson, and Ann Hertzberg. And I'm going to butcher those pronunciations, so feel free to dig on them on your own. I'll put the link to this wiki page in the comments, like all these other links. But now that we've agreed, or at least nailed down the fact that Israel is an apartheid state, according to the Human Rights Watch, we're going to see an example of this. And there are plenty of examples. I did make a video on a past channel of example after example of forcibly removing families from houses. But here we're going to see a Jewish Israeli individual stealing a house from a Palestinian family.
Jacob, this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, يا عمي.
And that bright individual's logic is, if he doesn't steal it, somebody else will. And very clearly, you see, cries out in pain as he strikes his enemy. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. He has this victimhood mentality, and yeah, I'm going to stop with my commentary. Please draw your own conclusions. But here's just an example of what's going on with Palestinians and how Israel is treating them. Now let's see how Israel treats others within their quote-unquote borders, as legitimate or delegitimate as one may believe. Here's one example that happened in 2013 and is said to continue to today. Israel forcibly injecting African immigrants with birth control. Let's see how they treat their Chinese visa workers. Chinese workers in Israel signed no sex contract, so Israel forced them to agree not to have sex or marry Israelis as a condition of getting a job. Let's see how they treat Christians. Christians in Jerusalem want Jews to stop spitting on them. And when they make it as inconvenient and undesirable as possible for you to live in their illegitimate state, they'll just deport you, even if you are a legitimate citizen. So Israel to deport 100 black Hebrews to the U.S. within 2 months. This just came out the other day, actually, same day as the Human Rights Watch report. And what's funny is reading into this, and I'll let you guys read this for yourselves, but a lot of these black Hebrews have been there for generations. In that land, in that region. So really interesting stuff. Now, this may seem bold, but a plan that failed, which is even bolder, is Israel working to relocate a great deal of African migrants. Up to 37,000 Africans in Israel have posed a moral dilemma for a state founded as a haven for Jews from persecution and a national home. So Benjamin Netanyahu led the charge and tried to relocate 37,000 African migrants into Europe, into the Western world, America. But those plans got foiled. Like I said, it continues happening anyway. But the data points we have from reputable news sources are almost indisputable. So what can you do? If we don't agree with this, we think this is bad. Human Rights Watch said, the world needs to act. How can we act? Well, the first thing we could do is probably stop sending them so much money. So how much money are we sending them, you may ask? So Jewish Virtual Library, and then many other sources, but this is actually a really good source for numbers, populations, money, documents every year of how much the U.S. has given in foreign aid to Israel. So last year, 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, we were seeing unemployment, we were seeing suicide rates skyrocket, we were seeing a whole bunch of sadness go down domestically. We still somehow managed to write a check for $3.8 billion for Israel to continue this apartheid and persecution. Now, this table actually doesn't even include loan guarantees. So loan guarantees are not considered foreign aid. So $8 billion, or 7.9, in guarantees have been excluded from this table. And then there's other military assistance as well here. Definitely worth looking into where your tax dollars are going. I often get almost physically sick thinking about me going to work in enabling these things across the world. It's extremely disheartening and demotivating as an American citizen. So if I feel like I can't control my taxes, what can I do? Well, I can control my spending. So as an American citizen, I can choose to boycott, divest, or sanction. However, the BDS movement now, similar to the Human Rights Watch, is called anti-Semitic in many ways. And in fact, in many states, there's anti-BDS legislation. So America, the nation that was founded on protests, granting you the ability to boycott regardless, in 35 states. When I made it I actually made a video. You can see the highlighting right here in green. Potentially, yep. My last video I made on Israel, this was the last state that had passed legislation barring you from boycotting, divesting, or sanctioning Israel. 3 more states passed. So in the middle of a pandemic, it looks like our politicians are still working hard to take away our rights to protest. And what does this mean? How can they actually impact you? Well, there's a great case of a teacher down in Texas who was a contractor for the government. I believe it was for autistic students. And she was an active boycotter of Israel, meaning she did not buy goods produced in or by Israel. And she actually almost lost her job, ended up going to court. And she actually, luckily she was a sole proprietor, so she was allowed to continue business with the U.S. government. But if you are incorporated, you're an LLC or you're a corp, you're literally not allowed to take a stance on boycotting Israel. The IRS even has programs to monitor if you are boycotting Israel. I have a whole video on that. I'm going to link that in the comments too. But just fascinating. So at this point, our hands are tied. Where as an American citizen, out of 35 out of 50 states, it's harder or almost illegal to boycott, divest, or sanction Israel. So at this point, we are almost forced to continue funding this apartheid state. And I don't know if much is going to change until more people start digging into it for themselves. So with that being said, please challenge me, question me, argue me in the comments. I don't mind. But I encourage you to look on your own, dig into these details, because these are significant details and stuff is going on every day. And we are just blissfully ignorant in our daily routines. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining this longer video by Newsbits. And I encourage you to ask questions and challenge. Take care.